Welcome to the Doom Scroll News Report here on Radio Taiwan International, where I, Amanda Stevens, and my co-host,
Hannah Belinsky,
two writers, political by necessity, cover some of the biggest international news stories dominating our news feeds from the last week. I'm Amanda Stevens, and this week we're tackling the ripple effects of the Trump-Xi summit, which I have not been able to outrun anywhere I go. The Ebola outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda, and media reforms, but this time, for good.
Yay!
Because, good God, Hannah,
It's been dark.
This week was so depressing.
It's been dark.
I got this script done late. That was definitely a reason, because when I kept looking through the news, I had to take, mental health breaks. And I feel like I've built up a pretty good tolerance for stuff.
We've been doom scrolling for a long time. You would think, it would be all right, but no.
Some of it is
some
of it is just so dark.
Yes.
But I hope you had a better week. Please tell me you had a better week than me.
It was okay. It's been all right.
Yeah.
Just more of the same. It's getting hot here again. So, well,
there's also that. Maybe that's what's tackling my endurance.
Making you tired, yeah. Brace yourself.
I'm never ready. Speaking of things I'm never ready for, let's talk about the Trump-Xi summit.
Ew.
This is going to be a really long one, but I can't disappoint you 2 weeks in a row, Hannah. Of course, I'm going to cover the story.
I mean, this is
you asked
the story.
me to do. It really is, but also, it really isn't.
Kind of unsatisfying.
And
yeah.
that's what I want to talk about.
Yeah.
So last week, the much anticipated, technically last week, the much anticipated Trump-Xi summit happened. U.S. President Donald Trump met Chinese President Xi Jinping in Beijing. And a lot of people were wondering what actually transpired there.
I would love to know.
I don't just mean because it was a closed-door meeting, but because there weren't any sweeping announcements or joint statements or the pictures holding up a document that usually accompany these things. You and I see this all the time.
Right.
I actually had multiple people message me this week to ask if I knew anything about it and what Taiwan's opinion even was about the whole thing. So we will get to Taiwan. That's going to be a whole separate issue because that seems to be maybe the only thing that really did come out of this.
We live here.
But let's talk about everything else first. So actually, you may not have heard much about it because many analysts consider this to be a stalemate, which means that there were no big agreements because the issues they discussed, they just can't agree on, despite what Trump claims to Fox News. So a lot of this is according to The Guardian's Amy Hawkins. She has a great summary article. And some of the big topics that they discussed were Iran, Taiwan, trade, on a related note, rare earths, but also human rights. We'll get to Taiwan separately. So on those other ones, like Iran, the U.S. has made statements that it wants China's help to end the conflict. And China basically said, not our circus, not our monkeys.
Which is valid.
Clean up your own mess. On the trade deal side, they did discuss them, but none of those have really been announced and confirmed by both sides, besides perhaps some deals for Boeing planes. That's something people were looking at because before Trump went over there, he was telling everyone that he was going to be selling planes, beans, and beef.
Okay, dude.
Yeah, that's up to him. There's a trade truce right now between China and the United States. But unfortunately, there was no movement on that, and it's going to expire in November, so we don't know if things are ever going to go back to normal.
Yeah.
This is the same tone that was set for the rare earths deal, meaning no deal, and it's still a pain point. And despite all the talk on human rights, and especially about Hong Kong media tycoon and democracy activist Jimmy Lai, she obviously declined to change the situation. Yeah. So all in all, if it weren't for the fanfare and the Taiwan discussions happening now, the reason you probably didn't hear much about the summit is because nothing else really happened. Hannah, does this rap sheet match your expectations? Or were you surprised by anything that you read about and general lack of progress?
I kind of knew that there would be more news about the buildup toward the meeting and the fanfare around the meeting than about anything that actually came of it, because that's kind of how it is when world leaders get together.
Especially these two. They love a good parade.
It's just appearances, right? Remember when Putin visited the United States and Trump literally rolled out a red carpet for him and we all face palmed really hard? It's the same sort of thing here. I read a lot of news about the hullabaloo leading up to it and about how he was received like a king and taken on a tour around the secret garden and basically buttered up.
Lots of pictures from that. I do got to say, great photographers.
Yes, it looks real fancy.
Looks nice.
Clearly buttering him up. And I just get a lot less news about what actually went down. I will say I'm not surprised by any of this because I expected Xi Jinping to walk him like a dog, and he did.
I'm not sure if he did, but honestly, I guess that's also sort of my expectations, and everyone's like, they're going to meet. I would have been more surprised if they actually did agree on anything, because in my mind, these are just two men who want to be right in any room that they're in and want to be the boss of any room that they're in. And you can't have two of those people in the same room be like, you know what, I think you're right, and I think that you have a better idea than me. It's never going to happen. That's never going to happen. So let's talk about Taiwan, because Xi himself did take pains to stress that this was the most important issue to him and U.S.-China relations. I know everyone here in Taiwan was closely watching for that same reason.
I was.
But it actually has yet to be seen if there will be any movement here or if this too will be some forgotten political theater. That same Guardian article claims that Trump made no commitments on China. This is also his words. But people are now looking to see if he will make any moves to change the U.S. stance on Taiwan. The public answer is no. By which I mean Trump, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the U.S. ambassador to China, and a whole host of other officials have directly said that the U.S. stance of strategic ambiguity towards Taiwan remains unchanged, and that they will continue to honor the Taiwan Relations Act and other accords between the two countries. However, his actions may still break precedent, as he often does, by just kind of doing what he wants.
Right.
A lot of talk centers around U.S. commitments to provide Taiwan with the means to defend itself, which is usually arms sales, which the U.S. is bound to do by the previously mentioned Taiwan Relations Act. However, after his meeting with Taiwan, Trump sent some mixed signals, including warning Taiwan to not officially declare independence.
We don't do that
saying,
anyway.
I'm not looking for someone to go independent,
Whatever,
end quote.
Dude.
But also saying he wants both sides to cool it because he doesn't want to get embroiled in another war, if you can imagine that.
Jeez.
The other news is that he is dragging his feet on approving a $14 billion arms deal to Taiwan,
Of course.
which has caused a lot of fear over here that it could signal the beginning of the U.S. slowly backing away from its required security guarantees. Then Trump said that he wanted to speak to, quote, the person in charge, end quote, referring to Taiwan's president, which previous presidents have refused. Because acknowledging Taiwan's president with another presidential call, let alone a meeting, would legitimize Taiwan's president, which China wouldn't like. All in that last week, it was busy, but still like no real action, you know? So at least not in my mind. Have you been following the back and forth? What are your thoughts on this debacle?
You know what's really annoying about this whole thing?
What, pick one point?
Yeah, I can pick one. Like, okay, I expected the other members of his administration to hold the line, you know, Rubio, the others. But I also expected Trump to be basically open to pawning off Taiwan. Here's the thing about the GOP. Like, I don't typically like having a Republican president because that tends to threaten women's reproductive rights and these other things I care a lot about.
Same.
And generally the vibes are just kind of bad when it's a Republican in the White House. But at the same time, it's not like a Democratic president is all smooth sailing all the time either. Usually my one consolation if we elect a Republican president is that, well, at least he'll be tough on China. And Trump is so transactional and so totally uninterested in anything that doesn't make him appear a certain way or line his pockets that he can't even give me that. And that is the most annoying thing. And that's just what I keep coming back to as I follow all the news on this. I'm just like, this guy doesn't care.
Get a load of this guy.
Doesn't care. Yeah.
And that is interesting because you're right that actually for all of the things that do divide the American political parties, generally speaking, Taiwan is not one of them. And even if they are sort of on the fence, most of the time they're just like in support of ambiguity, strategic ambiguity.
Status quo.
Very few. I don't think I've ever heard a single one be like,
don't
and you know
think
what?
so.
I think China should just grab it.
No.
I don't think I've ever heard a single American politician.
I don't think so.
Trump is pretty singular in that. But I'm going to have to kind of like word vomit here to explain like the current situation. So
Go for it.
let me take a deep breath and try to get this out. Taiwan did hit back a little bit over the week, but not much behind kind of like a cheeky remark from President Lai Ching-te around his second anniversary in office, where he basically said, like, don't worry about us declaring independence because Taiwan has always been independent. Yeah. So why would we declare anything?
Standard line.
Obviously, China doesn't like that, but they already view President Lai and his DPP, or Democratic People's Party, as a separatist and as a separatist troublemaking institution.
Ooh.
Things have been especially tense because that same party has been in power for the last 10 years here in Taiwan.
We've held the line for a long time.
8 with former President Tsai Ing-wen, and now 2 with President Lai. So you can see why China would be getting touchier about acknowledging Taiwan's government when the most anti-China party has been the ruling party here for a decade. That makes it particularly interesting to me that Trump has moved on from implying he'd like to speak directly to President Lai to just saying that he will do so. To be fair, this would be the second time Trump has done this. Yeah. He accepted a congratulations call from then-President Tsai Ing-wen just after his first electoral win, but he's the only president to have done so since 1979, the same year that the One China policy and the U.S.-Taiwan Relations Act were established. His logic, according to him, is that he, quote, talks to everybody, end quote. When Trump first announced his interest in speaking with Lai, Taiwan was actually cautious, saying that they would need to assess the intentions of the call before agreeing to anything. They've since then changed their tune. Still, I think that there is some anxiety around it as a whole. On one hand, most of Taiwan, even kind of in both parties, likes it whenever something actually legitimizes Taiwan as like in Taiwan's sovereignty.
We're always trying to do that in a way.
On the other, though, doing this will infuriate Beijing. Trump also said that he would like to talk to Lai to address the, quote, Taiwan problem, which echoes Beijing language around the issues of Taiwanese sovereignty. And don't forget that $14 billion arms deal, what Trump is reportedly holding on to because he believes it's a good bargaining chip with China.
That's what I meant.
In fact, he discussed this with Xi at the summit as well, which is another breach of policy.
Of course.
Because U.S. policy before this has been that the U.S. will not consult China on those sales for obvious reasons. Some analysts believe that Trump won't approve the sale until after September 2026, when he's invited Xi to visit him in the United States. And the whole thing is just, like I said at the front, sending mixed signals to me. I personally have the feeling that it's going to be a lot of negotiating for things to ultimately stay the same. But I've completed my second promise of like word vomiting. Hannah, what is your opinion on the Trump-Lai call? Is it good? Is it bad? Is it answer C? There are no good answers.
I think the mixed signals on mixed signals, the feeling of just going in circles just for things to stay the same, that's very much kind of the MO of this whole thing. You know? Because at the end of the day, I can't really be certain just because it's Trump and he probably doesn't understand how he is supposed to hold the line here. He's also definitely less ideologically committed to Taiwan than most U.S. politicians are in terms of foreign policy. And I think in his facile mind, he seems to truly believe he can just strike a deal on anything, and that is how he can handle complex geopolitical matters. And it's just not how it works. And if we really wanted to get down to brass tacks, the war talk, the arms sales, whatever, this is all kind of just a front everyone has to put up anyway.
Like the strategic ambiguity.
Yeah. And the most plausible type of aggression we're looking at from them is a blockade, not military invasion. The rest of this, it's political theater. It's just constantly making us expend energy trying to stay relevant in the face of China trying to squash us from global relevance in every arena that they can find. So, I don't know. It's crazy. There's probably no good answers.
C. There's no good answers. Yeah. All right, we're going to pick up with nobody's favorite topic,
Not
Ebola.
Again.
Another disease outbreak, Hannah. I'm starting to miss my other beats. Never thought I'd miss reading about tech bros.
Hantavirus landed on you,
I did
and so did Ebola.
I will say these two are not wholly unconnected. I think if you listen to our hantavirus story, you'll hear a lot of similarities here.
Yeah.
Well, let's get into it. This week, the World Health Organization, or WHO, declared the Ebola crisis in the Democratic Republic of Congo, I will be saying the DRC from here on out, to be a public health crisis of international concern. And they said a public health emergency of international concern.
Help.
That means that the virus is dangerous, and it has the potential to cause a lot of harm if it spreads. But the situation does not meet the threshold for a pandemic. The biggest threats are regional, but other countries should be on high alert and basically send as much help as they can to the DNR and Uganda. That's because this week Uganda reported 2 cases of Ebola, which crossed borders into their capital from the DRC, and is now also enacting prevention measures. So far, in terms of statistics, the virus has more than 600 suspected cases and caused 139 deaths, but the numbers are suspected of being much higher than that. Much of my numbers and reporting today come from NPR's Gabrielle Emanuel. It's a really long and comprehensive story, and I'm going to try and give you guys the TLDR here. So the biggest concern is that the outbreak right now is caused by the Bundibugyo Ebola strain. While the strain isn't new and it actually has a slightly lower fatality rate than other strains, it is more difficult to contain because there is no vaccine for it. And there are no bespoke treatment measures, both of which we do have for some of the more deadly strains. Additionally, outbreaks are happening in urban areas, which means more people to potentially spread the virus. And the DNR is in a tough place between migrants fleeing conflicts like Sudan or even local conflicts. But there's also the fact that experts suspect the outbreak has actually been unfolding for months, since April. And it's only recently become large enough for international organizations like the WHO to notice. The final worrisome nail is the fact that many centers and organizations are underfunded because USAID is no longer supplying them or even present to assist in containment like in the past. Like they don't even have the basic things that they need to deal with this.
That's really, I think, the crux of this issue because, I mean, it's not like the U.S. unleashed Ebola in Africa.
No.
But it is partly culpable because they cut a bunch of funding to agencies that are in charge of global disease surveillance and outbreak response. And it's not even entirely because they want to help these countries per se, but because they want to keep these diseases from getting to the United States.
It's literally like what we said in one of our very first episodes. We don't do every service for ourselves.
No.
You know, and it is in the best interest of the world, which we are all a part of, no matter how much you don't want to be, to help other countries and for other countries to help us contain when there's a big disease like this. So there is some good news, but it is scant. First is that with a more robust healthcare system and more robust assistive care, the fatality rate is lower. But also that the disease is less contagious than others that are going around, looking at you, measles. And so typical preventive measures actually work really well when dealing with it. Ebola spreads primarily through contact with bodily fluids of the infected and symptomatic patients. That means that contact tracing, quarantining, and frequent hand washing actually do a lot to help curb it.
However,
it just comes down to taking those measures seriously and to the extent that it can actually stop the spread of the virus, not just kind of keep it where it is. And that's part of the problem in the DRC, if not Uganda. Healthcare facilities may not have gloves or running water.
That is how underfunded these people are.
The thing is, they would have these supplies if USAID were there. They're now having to focus a lot of energy on airlifting supplies to areas that are affected. So the end thing is that it's unlikely that rich countries will see a large outbreak.
Naturally.
But it is possible that some cases may spread outside of the area. And now, Hannah, I know a lot of people tend to be scared of Ebola because of that 1995 movie Outbreak. And I'm usually one of them, but this time I'm not actually scared of catching Ebola. I'm just angry that defunding and a lack of attention to the area means it took so long to detect. And it will probably be a protracted and deadly struggle for the people on the ground to just get this virus under control. How do you feel now that you have all the facts?
Well, I'm like you. I don't think we need to be scared because we're not in Africa. We're not going to Africa. We don't know anybody who's going to Africa.
We can wash our hands.
Yeah, the fact of the matter is we are in a rich country and we're safe. But it's horrible seeing this unfold. It's always
and it could have been prevented.
Right? And knowing that,
or at least contained.
Yes, knowing that the world's governments slashing funds, because it's not just the U.S., I believe it's the U.K. also. These are partly to blame for how badly it's going for them on the ground. And that is really sad. You know, they just, Africa seems to be the last place on anyone's mind a lot of the time. And there's a lot of
Unless it
reasons
has
for
to
that.
do with taking resources.
Exactly. Yep.
So we're going to squeeze in a really quick pick-me-up because I needed it after this.
Yes,
I feel like some listeners will too. All right, our pick-me-up news is some follow-up to what's going on in Hungary.
Oh, yes, we love this story.
I love this story. When we discussed the country before, we touched briefly on the media empire that was in place there, which was a huge part of how previous President Viktor Orban held power and maintained his illiberal democracy.
Because propaganda works.
Reuters last week put out a piece just after we recorded our episode that I found really hopeful, which was about how that same empire is now falling apart without him at the helm.
Hooray!
Orban held a tight hold on media institutions and national media, making sure that they only reflected his party points, including spreading his anti-immigrant propaganda far and wide. It may feel familiar to many listeners if you heard that episode. You'll remember that it's not a coincidence. His media control was part of the blueprint that many other wannabe authoritarians are copying. Outlets that just repeat his talking points with no other counterpoint of views or really any voices at all.
Yeah.
A long list of seemingly independent social media influencers, private news organizations shuttered or appropriated by pro-government businesses. You've seen it before, unfortunately. The article even mentions a story from someone in the media who recalls trying to find a doctor that would testify on camera that migrants were dangerous disease spreaders.
Jeez.
And now President Magyar had strong opinions about this framework, calling it a, quote, factory of lies, and making one of his promises to dismantle the system and create a more balanced new one. The article talks about how there have already been noticeable changes, including those pro-government influencers essentially disappearing from social media, and many more varied viewpoints appearing on the news outlet literally the week after the election. But, of course, it's going to be a while and require real legal reforms before people and journalists likely trust the media to be truly independent.
Of course.
We drew a lot of parallels between the system in Hungary under Orban and the system currently in the U.S. under Trump and MAGA. So I want to ask you if you think that this is another place where we can draw a potential future parallel. Do you think that the U.S. media sphere is capable of a similar resilience that the Hungarian one is showing?
I'm glad you are optimistic about this because I really don't
This is our good cop, bad cop thing.
The thing is, there's so much money in the United States now, and it's so concentrated in a select few who have way too much power and control over so many things, the media, politics, and in a way it's always been like this, right?
Yeah.
But at this moment, America feels more than ever so captured by its billionaires that I just don't know. I guess my one consolation is Mamdani. New York City's
I love hearing about Mamdani.
Yeah. I mean, he's not perfect, but it's something.
No,
right? It's something. And in the meantime, all I can do is keep trying to diversify my media sources and just always question what the algorithm pushes to me. It's all very sus now.
Well, something that made me interested was the Stephen Colbert show just ended.
Yeah.
The late night show with Stephen Colbert.
It's been running a long time.
11 years.
Yeah.
So at the time, like basically interesting that these two things are coinciding on our show at least.
Yeah.
But there had been some murmurations about like maybe Colbert and someone else, maybe someone like Amy Maddow or anybody in the United States, making their own media organization to be a counterpoint to a lot of the right-winging that's going on with all of these other organizations. So now, obviously, he hasn't said he's going to do that. He said he's going to go write a movie. But it did sort of make me curious as to, like, once these people do get displaced, which a lot of people view this as, what are they going to do, you know? And
that's really the question.
Some of them may move on to make new media organizations, which is how a lot of these changes often happen. That's how we get new media. So
I should hope so. What? Free market? Come on, like
make people angry and then they do their own thing.
Sure.
And sometimes it's really bad, but sometimes that's good.
Yeah. Anything is better than what's happening now.
Well, that's it for today's news report. A quick reminder that you can find all of our referenced articles in the show notes for today's episode. I'm Amanda Stevens.
I'm Hannah Walensky.
And thanks for joining us on air today. Tune in tomorrow for more programs by Radio Taiwan International. And in the meantime, remember to stop scrolling and touch grass. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.